Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Time Traveler's Handbook. Today we are going to be talking about Doctor Who Season 6, Episode 1, The Impossible Astronaut. Spoilers ahead. Over the first two episodes of Season 6, the Doctor and his companions discover and apprehend a group of aliens called the Silents, who have the ability to make someone forget they saw them and have been influencing humankind since the dawn of man. There are a couple of things from this episode that I want to talk about, but let's talk first about the Silents. As said before, they essentially erase someone's memory of any event in which they witnessed the silence. This is definitely interesting, as what ends up happening is that you get a sense of lost time anytime you see the silence. Losing time is interesting to talk about because it's not really an element of time travel in the literal sense that someone is time traveling, but you can think of it in a way that makes sense on a time travel level as jumping forward in time mentally to the next point where you don't have lost time. To illustrate what I mean, someone could walk into a room with a silence and look at them for 1 minute, then turn around after that minute. From a literal perspective to an onlooker, supposedly one that can't see the silence, of course, the person walked into the room, stood there for a minute, and then turned around. From the perspective of the person in the room, they walked into the room and basically immediately turned around. Their mind has traveled forward in time, and it just skipped the part where they were witnessing the silence and overwrote the mind that was there in their body before that did witness the silence. Now, of course, this isn't really how mind wiping actually works, but you can use this as a mechanic in other things to give the impression that your mind is being wiped. But in reality, there are just multiple versions of yourself that remember different things at different stages of your time stream. This might be a useful tool somewhere, but I don't know. It kind of seems like I'm just overcomplicating things. They're essentially the same thing when you look at it on the outset. So it does seem a little bit easier to just say their mind was wiped, but I can see a situation where having multiple versions of yourself that keep on overwriting themselves like a save file, that can be interesting to talk about, and that has some interesting applications. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the influencing of history that the Silents do. This is fascinating to me because we know that from later episodes, the Silents were created in the future and then sort of implanted back in time to influence things and make sure events lead up to their desired plan and creation. This feeds into our talk about fixed points, because you can have the Silents influence things to make those fixed points happen in a certain way. Just the slightest nudge in the right direction is all that they would be doing, and just to make sure that their desirable outcome happened in the end and the future went on the desirable path. The last thing I wanted to mention is that in the beginning of the episode, a version of the Doctor that is 200 years older than the Doctor that they know at present appears to the companions. He is subsequently shot and killed by an astronaut who emerges from a lake. We'll talk about that later. Later on, the companions meet the Doctor that they presently know which is 200 years behind the one that they just saw killed, realizing that this was a premonition and that the Doctor would die on that beach later in the future. I really like this approach to prophecy or premonition or predicting future events, whatever you want to call it. By seeing those events happening, essentially you are giving the audience a huge foreshadowing event for events to come, and it puts them in a situation where they think that there's no way to get out of this mess that they've created. And the audience would be right for the most part, and we'll discuss later how they get around the Doctor dying at the end of the season. But that's really all I wanted to talk about with this episode. Thank you for watching, and next time we will continue with the episode, The Doctor's Wife. Thank you for listening.